Light has no meaning without darkness. And in order to have heroes, we also need some kind of adversary, some kind of monster. I'm Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men and Fire in the Dark, and today we are going to talk about the dragon from the Rig Veda. I'm joined today by Ed, a valued member of the Order of Fire, my new organization for men of the future who want to live and create solar culture. All right, so Ed, tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to learn about Sanskrit and this Vedic material.
Well, it started probably in my, I would say, very early 20s. I had an interest in things like Buddhism, like a lot of people in their early 20s do, exploring new things. And I was invited to a Hindu temple by some friends during a festival. And I tasted the food there, and it kind of blew my mind. And I had a bunch of questions, and that led to starting to learn about the rituals behind the food, which then led to an interest in Bhagavad Gita, which is a Sanskrit text. And I just got more and more into it and started reading as much as I could, talking to as many people as I could. And then eventually I went to India and ended up taking several trips over a period of about 20 years, doing my own research into those things. And then back home, I took part in a Bhagavad Gita memorization group. So I had to look closely at a lot of Sanskrit. I studied the Hindi language for a number of years as well, which uses the same script, Devanagari. So that really opened a door, because you can look at Sanskrit in its, actual text, and it helps with pronunciation. And since Hindi is also it's a Sanskritic language, there's a lot of similarities, at least as far as vocabulary. And so just over so many years, reading these things, Bhagavad Gita led to reading the original Vedas and anything I could get my hands on. And so over time, you start to see the root words, keywords that really stand out and give a lot of meaning to things. And it's still part of my everyday life.
One of the most a lot of people wonder why we're, even our new members in the Order of Fire, wonder why we're, so interested in the Rig Veda. And one of the things I want to point out to everybody is that, all these other mythic texts that we engage with, whether it's, the Iliad or the Odyssey or, like some of the Germanic literature, so much of that material, is really folklore. It's folklore and it's literature and it's a story. But none of those are sacred texts. They're stories. There were stories meant to tell but the Rig Veda is actually a sacred text. And so I think that's very in the way that the Bible is a sacred text. There's a differentiation there. And so I think it's really important. And it's also one of the oldest in the world. So it's a really important text, and we see so many of the same themes. And so today I wanted to drill down on this concept of the dragon, and it's the dragon that Indra slays, and so that I don't murder it. How do you pronounce the dragon?
Vṛtra.
Vritra. Okay.
Vṛtra. It's a V, and it has a little R attached, and then Tra, which is a compound consonant. It's a T and a R combined together to make sort of one letter. And the V, it's like a soft V. Mm-hmm. And in some cases that V becomes a little bit V with a little bit of a W sound. It depends on whether it's after a consonant, etc. There's so many rules in Sanskrit. It's just like, just studying the rules alone, you would never learn the language, just the rules. But Vṛtra, and you can give a little more V if that's like what your mouth does. Vṛtra, whatever it takes.
Vritra, okay. Cool. Yeah, I had to research that for when I read The Fire in the Dark. I try to make sure I pronounce everything as well as possible. But it's always better to have someone who can do it right. I had never actually heard the alphabet pronounced. I just know how to type it in so that I can find the font. And I was pronouncing it totally differently. I was like, it was Devanagari to me. But you just pronounce it totally differently, and it's really important to kind of get that information. And so, we can look right away at what that actually means. Because the name of the dragon means something. And when I looked it up, it seems to mean, coverer, investor, restrainer, an enemy, a foe, a hostile host. So the word itself doesn't really mean dragon, although he's refers to as dragon and first of dragons and so forth throughout the text. But the word means more than that.
Well, he's a serpent also, which a dragon is sort of a flying serpent with legs. He's also called a he, which is a serpent. Yeah. Several times throughout Rig Veda, a he, which is a snake. So.
Yeah, and it's. I looked at it once, and I guess we're skipping ahead right now. But I looked at it, and I'm like, because it says he's limbless, and but then he also has his limbs severed, and I'm like, does that mean he has tentacles? It's is it like this Lovecraftian monster? It's so there's a lot of references in there I think are really interesting, and try to unpack. But then there's also this euhemeristic layer to it, and I don't like to pull everything into euhemerism and be like it was originally a man and then they just built it up, but because I don't think that's always true, because symbols are really important. But it's just an interesting direction, and the more I dug into this, the more interesting it was. So I think what we're going to do, there are three main hymns that I picked out where he really discusses the dragon. It's all throughout the Rig Veda, but there are three main hymns that I picked out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the hymns, and then we'll stop and kind of get some commentary and talk about some ideas, as it goes on. So the first one is in Book 1, and it is hymn 32. I have to read Roman numerals because that's what they're written out as. But all right, so hymn 32, Indra. I will declare the manly deeds of Indra, the first that he achieved, the thunder wielder. He slew the dragon, then disclosed the waters, and cleft the channels of the mountain torrents. He slew the dragon lying on the mountain. His heavenly bolt of thunder, Vṛtra fashioned, like lowing kine in rapid flow descending the waters, glided downward to the ocean. So first of all, wanted to get into one of the reasons we also love the Rig Veda is it's so fucking high test. That people miss that the manly deeds of Indra, the thunder wielder. I mean, he's Thor turned up to like a 12, really. But and there's a part about him disclosing the waters and so forth, and we'll get back to that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the bolt of thunder that Vṛtra fashioned. First of all, can you pronounce Vṛtra better for the audience?
Vṛtra.
Okay.
Vṛtra. Yeah, he's the artisan god. Makes things, weapons, tools, and he makes the Vṛtra, our beloved Vṛtra. He makes that for Indra, and a thousand spikes, right?
Yeah. Cool. All right, I will continue. Impetuous as a bull, he chose the soma, and in 3 sacred beakers drank the first juices. Maghavan grasped the thunder of his weapon, and smote to death this firstborn of dragons. Now, Maghavan, can you explain what that is a little bit?
It's one of Indra's names.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Gods get to have more than one name.
They all have like epithets and so forth.
Yeah. And it's actually Damn, it really, there's some controversy about like the real meaning behind Magavan, um, and ultimately it works out to like mighty,
Okay, nice.
mighty, like of bringing wealth, bringing riches is one interpretation of it. Um,
Right, and
so
that's one of the reasons why one of the things that we like also about the Rig Veda is that um, it's not an ascetic book in the text of like everybody they're praying for wealth and riches. He brings wealth and riches. It's not anti-materialist. Like you can't have nice things in this world. Save it for the next one. It is it's very much like their gods bring riches to the people who worship them. Which is very different from a lot of things that a lot of Westerners are used to.
no, it's a sign of success, and it's a sign that you are a great man who's like knows how to perform a sacrifice.
When Indra, thou hadst slain the dragon's firstborn, and overcome the charms of the enchanters, then, giving life to sun and dawn and heaven, thou foundest not one foe to stand against thee. Indra with his own great and deadly thunder smote into pieces Vṛtra, worst of Vṛtras. As trunks of trees, what time the axe hath felled them, low on the earth so lies the prostrate dragon. He, like a mad weak warrior, challenged Indra, the great impetuous many-slaying hero. He, brooking not the clashing of the weapons, crushed Indra's foe, the shattered forts in falling. Footless and handless, still he challenged Indra, who smote him with his bolt between the shoulders. Emasculate, yet claiming manly vigor. Thus Vṛtra lay with scattered limbs dissevered. And there's a lot in there that's interesting. One of the things right away, emasculate, like claiming manly vigor, which is, and you start to see not just a dragon, but a sorcerer. You see the possibility of this character. As I started to read through this the other day, I was thinking, I'm like, this is now I'm blanking on the name from Conan, the serpent. This is the serpent guy from Conan. It's Thulsa Doom. He's basically like, and you can kind of see that in this story. Like this is Thulsa Doom. He's a serpent lord who worships snakes and has mighty spells because there's stuff in here that says, overcome the charms of the enchanters. So it's not just one, but there's a whole bunch of enchanters in there. So it's like, does he have an army of wizards? There's just a lot here. I think there's a really just a cool story in all
and
this.
The enchanters is often, it's a translation from something like Maya, illusion, which is a very common word in contemporary Hinduism, even to the point where some schools say that the world itself is an illusion, Maya, which is kind of nihilistic, but really ultimately it means, that the world is temporary.
Yeah.
And that the illusion is thinking that you're going to permanently be here and not taking steps to, be great or something like that. But yeah, the enchanters are often something with the root Maya, illusion. Guileful is often comes from that as well.
Which is like and kind of a mean deceitfulness, I like that. I like the word guile a lot, actually. Someone who's innocent is guileless, and someone who's like always machinating and yes, Machiavellian is guileful. Something I like. But yeah, what you were explaining actually in terms of the Vedic reminded me of simulation theory. Which we've been talking about recently. It's the idea that we're all in a simulation. It's not real. It's all an illusion. But And also there was that footless and handless bit again, but then Vṛtra's laid with scattered limbs dissevered. So he doesn't have feet or hands, but he has limbs. So that's an interesting thing. But
Yeah, and emasculated, that comes up a few times throughout these hymns we were looking at, and that's Vadri.
okay.
Vadri is castrated, literally, but sometimes it's contrasted with the opposite, Vrishayu, which means like rutting. So it's like that emasculated demon snake, is contending with Vrishayu, which Vrish is like the bull.
Yeah.
But Vrishayu, it's like something that is like high energy and rutting. I think that's great.
Awesome.
But like we could do 2 hours on just find the high test words.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, that's why obviously, I love the Maruts. And I spent hours drilling down on that because of all the way they're described is how every band of warriors ever would want to be described. It's pretty fantastic. But yeah, like, I mean, that's so now we have a eunuch priest. We have a evil eunuch priest, sorcerer, serpent sorcerer. Like I said, I feel like there's like a Robert E. Howard version of the Rig Veda that has yet to be written. But unfortunately, Robert Howard's like, very dead. But anyway, let me see where that I think I stopped at emasculate. There he lies like a bank bursting river. The waters taking courage flow above him. The dragon lies beneath the feet of torrents, which Vṛtra, with his greatness, had encompassed. The humbled was the strength of Vṛtra's mother. Indra hath cast his deadly bolt against her. The mother was above, the son was under, and like a cow beside her calf lay Danu. So what's going on there with the mother? I mean, have you looked into that at all?
A little bit. And recently I was thinking, I want to know more about this because so many of like the gods and the demons have like the stories about their parents change. There's sometimes it's like, wait, I just read something that said, Vritra's father is Tvastor, the one we mentioned earlier, who makes the Vṛtra, which kills his own son. But then there's another story where it's like, okay, different parents. So it gets really complex. And we're dealing with like translations from an archaic version of a language.
So another thing I wanted to look at is this is the first time we haven't talked about this theme yet about the waters, and the waters is a big element in this whole story because what he's really doing is, and this has some we recognize this from other things in terms of especially there's the Jormungand in the Germanic literature. There's this serpent associated with waters, and what Vṛtra is doing is he's at least metaphorically he's dammed the rivers. He's basically like sitting upon or holding in the waters, and which the effect of that obviously on the people. Whatever people are in the world at this time. It doesn't really make that clear as far as I know. But, the waters, obviously he's creating drought, artificial drought by withholding resources. And one of the things somebody pointed out, and I wanted to point out was basically like, once you start talking about the water as resources, then you have the connection with later dragons like Smaug. The European idea of dragon that sits on a mound of gold because water is the first resource so that you can make plants and grow things and have crops and feed your cattle and all that. And then as time goes on, when you have fiat currency and all that kind of stuff, you have gold and so forth. Um, Bitcoin. But it's like who controls all the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it becomes really spicy, I think, in a prophetic, like interesting connection with the modern world. It's like, well, who are the evil people? The evil people who control the wealth and keep the wealth from the people. It has this eternal theme that runs through it that I think is very recognizable today.
Yeah, Vṛtra is described as coiled around a mountain, holding back the seven rivers.
Yes.
It's I get these Roman numerals. I'm like I forget which one that is, but later there's one. Indra hath hurled down the magician Maya Vritra, who lay beleaguering the mighty river. Then both the heaven and earth trembled in terror at the strong hero's thunder when he bellowed. And I was looking at that, and the word for river is Sindhu, right? Which can mean the Indus River is what it usually means. That it goes from the Himalayas down through what's now Pakistan, down through Sindh province, Karachi, out to the ocean. That's the Indus River. It's called Sindhu, but it could also mean any river, and there's like seven major rivers. Incidentally, that's where the word Hindu comes from, because the Persian people that were moving on in have a hard time with Sindhu. So it ended up being Hindu, and now, there's a whole thing about that. But yeah, holding back the water. Incidentally, the hero's thunder there, hero is bull in Sanskrit. So it's the bulls bellowing thunder. So, hero tells us one thing, but bull tells us something even better, I think.
Right. Yeah. Because hero has a whole association with words. I know Christopher Robertson gets into that, sometimes, and others with, hero being associated with Hera and all kinds of other associations that you have. But bull is a different thing entirely, so that's a different meaning, really.
And there's quite a few verses hymns like that. And I was thinking about it, like, well, really what, it's holding back the river. And I was like, but like, what's the bigger story? Like the bigger takeaway? And I was like, well, Vṛtra is any obstruction that is, holding back rain or water, which is the source of life. It's sort of, water's a big deal.
Absolutely.
Everybody dies without it. You hear stories where, there's cattle being held back. That's kind of a big deal. The sun being held back we see in myths, which is like, that's about as bad as it gets. But, water, everyone's going to die. Everything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've heard things that later, we're going to have water wars in like 50 years or whatever. But obviously it's a huge deal. Cool. All right, let's continue with this. Have to make sure okay. Rolled in the midst of never ceasing currents, flowing without a rest forever onward. The waters bear off Vṛtra's nameless body. The foe of Indra sank to during darkness. Guarded by Ahi stood the thralls of Dasas. The waters laid like kine held by the robber. But he, when he had smitten Vṛtra, opened the cave wherein the floods had been imprisoned. So, do you have any thoughts on what Ahi is?
It's a snake.
It's a snake.
Okay. That is Vṛtra.
That's another name. That's another.
This is another name. Yeah.
Okay.
And and the water stayed like kine. In case some people might not know, that's cows.
Right. Yeah. I had to look that up the first time.
We see milch kine, lowing kine come up a lot, and that's milch kine is a cow that's recently given birth, and that means lots of milk flowing forth, and that's used a lot as a metaphor for the good stuff being distributed freely. The thralls of dasas. That's a dasa is a interesting word.
All right, let's go there.
Yeah, in the Rig Vedic sense, it's it's servile. It's someone that's servile.
Mhm.
A slave, literally. And it's in the Rig Veda, it's used to to describe something really not good. Like it's a servile, slave-like person that's in the way, helping out the demons. Really, part of a race of demons. The interesting thing is now in post-Vedic and Hindu culture, it's a surname. It's a surname, so some people have that as a last name. But in post-Vedic Sanskrit and in Hindi, other South Asian languages, it means servant, and it has been absorbed into to religious ideals, especially worshippers of Vishnu, which are the vast majority of Indian subcontinent. That to mean a servant, sort of in the Catholic sense, servant of God, or servant of an associate of God. So in a lot of those Vishnu worshipping sects, when people get initiated with sacrificial fire and become a disciple, to their guru, who is the actual patriarchal connection, from one person to another, going to God himself, they'll get a new name and then have dasa or dasi for the feminine attached to their name. So they might get a name like, their name might be Krishna Das, servant of Krishna. And so it's like a positive thing. Now it just means, servant. Or someone will say, "Oh, I'm the Das Anu Das. I'm the servant of the servant." It's very Catholic.
So now it'd be like Dasso Christ or whatever. Like a sort of,
yeah. Jesus Das.
Jesus does. Yeah.
But the devotional bhakti, sort of became and that's human nature. Also, it works well in a lot of people's lives. So that bhakti devotion became, sort of the main current because it's for every person. It transcends. It transcends statuses, and priestliness. You can be a mudslinger and,
Yeah. So,
but it's interesting that it goes from like, servile hosts of the dark, to I love God.
And in terms of the imagery, which is what's really captured me about these verses, because we're used to hearing about Indra and the Maruts and just being kind of awesome, so this is just the awesome language used to describe them. But then the story seems to be there's a real story in these actual verses about the dragon, because that's where that's the hero's journey or whatever that they have to go through to slay the dragon, and so that's how they're known. And so we have this story here, and now it's like we've now added a hordes of slaves to the the dragon or serpent lord, that serpent sorcerer lord with his enchanters and hordes of slaves that are surrounded by that, like, it's getting very Hollywood now. Like, it's building.
Here's a good one though. Here's a good one. I'll skip to in book 2, 227. There is Indra, the slayer of Vritra, the destroyer of cities, has scattered the black-sprung servile hosts. He engendered the earth and the waters for Manu. May he fulfill the entire prayer of the sacrificer. I was like, I got to look closer at this. What the heck is a black-sprung servile host? And so I look, and this is slightly different. I'm using 2 translations. Like we have our Order of Fire. Our translation is Griffith, Ralph Griffith, but I also look at H. Wilson. I really like the language, and I love having both, but in front of me. But I was like black sprung servile host, and so I was looking at the Sanskrit, and it's Krishna Yonir Dasir, which Krishna. This is not Krishna, the god of love, but as in black. Krishna means black or dark, and Yoni is the womb.
Right.
Womb or the parts. And
Right.
so, yeah, and Dasa. So Krishna Yonir Dasir. So servant of like the dark, born out of the dark womb.
Servant of the black vagina.
Yeah, exactly. Of the dark, evil vagina. And, yeah, and so and basically it's describing like part of what this sort of race of demons that's like on Vritra's side. They're sacrifice disturbers. They're like an army of people that disturb the sacrifice, which most likely has also to do with water being available. Things have to be washed, sprinkled with water before they're given to the fire. And then I was reading further. I was like, this is one of the crazy. I was like, I'm really into this. And I was looking further, and there's also a possibility that it might actually be an interpretation of an actual, like, the pregnant wife of one of the demons giving birth. But either way, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once you did, like we were laughing about the podcast that Christopher did with the Harvard scholar,
Dr. Naj.
And Dr. Naj, and what I just look things up is like what do you do? I just look things up, and that's really what this is. Like once you start looking things up, then it becomes much more interesting, and there's a lot more depth to all this stuff because words have like these multiple meanings. And that's why I love etymology. There's so much there. Once you open up etymology, it's like its own little book that tells you a lot of different things. So all right. So now we're at the thralls of Dasas. All right. The last few verses are: a horse's tail wast thou when he, O Indra, smote on thy bolt. Though God without a second, thou hast won back the kine, hast won the Soma. Thou hast let loose the flow, the seven rivers. Nothing availed him lightning, nothing thunder, hailstorm, or mist, which had spread around him, when Indra and the dragon strove in battle. Maghavan gained the victory forever. Whom sawest thou to avenge the dragon, Indra, that fear possessed thy heart when thou hadst slain him? That, like a hawk affrighted through the regions, thou crossed 99 flowing rivers. Indra is king of all that moves and moves not, of creatures tame and horned, the thunder wielder. Over all living men he rules as sovereign, containing all as spokes within the felly. Spokes within the felly. Is that what does that translate in yours? Do you know? Is it different version?
I didn't get to this.
Look at that one. Yeah, I didn't see that until just now. I'm like, what the hell is that?
I would have harder time with the English here. Like, what's a felly?
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, also like bay steeds. Yeah, like I had to look that up. Like, it's a brown horse, but most people wouldn't know what that is. And there's a lot of language that obviously we're sometimes dealing with a 19th century translation, and then that's just different English. So that's another thing. But did you see anything in that one that was of interest that you wanted to talk about?
No.
No, I think we got the Maghavan and Sovran. I'm guessing, is that an English thing too? Is that just sovereign?
It could be. I'm not sure. Though in depending on where we get, I can bring up actually now sovereign. That comes up in one of these hymns. in the one book 1, hymn 80, line 12. Is it okay if we go there?
Yeah, go there. Yeah.
Since we got to the word sovereign, Vṛtra deterred not Indra by his trembling or his clamor. The many-edged iron thunderbolt fell upon him, manifesting his own sovereignty. Indra manifesting his own sovereignty. Two things I loved about that is the many-edged iron thunderbolt, Sahasra Bristi, 1,000 spikes. I mean, that's awesome. Who doesn't want a weapon with 1,000 spikes? And then the manifesting his own sovereignty, I looked at that, and it was just what I suspected it would be: Svaraja, Svarajam, which Sva, own, one's own, and Raja is a king, but Raja, Rajam, sovereignty, rulership. So our thunder god here, by his initial, that first strike is really what it's describing. Strikes with this 1,000-spiked Vṛtra, and he manifests his own independent kingship at that moment. And that, for men, that's a really big deal. For men to relate to that in a number of ways. Side point, that word Svaraja later on, a couple millennia later, became associated with the Indian independence movement in the 1940s. Svaraja, independent rule. So that was sort of Gandhi, Nehru's, that was the advertisement, for independent rule, that they wanted to achieve Svaraja. And then now, 70 years later, it is the title of a right-wing Hindu nationalist publication. That's its own controversy and a separate topic.
Right. But I want Svarajan. I want that too.
Yeah, and it's what it's you hear that in certain American cultures, king-minded. Mm-hmm. You've got to get king-minded, and that is it's saying the same exact thing. I'm king-minded.
Yeah, and that's this is something that strings through all of the myths that we're talking about, is that this is what the striker does. There's that not every striker becomes a king, but that's how the king becomes what he is. Yeah. Is this is how Zeus rose to become king of the Olympians, is that he had to kill one of the this horrible monster in his war with the Titans, and then then he becomes king of Olympus and throws down the other gods and becomes the new god.
And
he becomes king of the gods. Yeah,
it's not because he threw the 1,000-spiked weapon into the ground like some kid with firecrackers off a balcony.
Right.
He had to kill the dragon.
Yeah,
and that's the case in all of those stories.
Yeah, you have to fill. They actually have to fight that, overcome the thing that is threatening them or whatever, and become the hero, really, and vanquish this demon or this bad thing and overcome it. And I mean, like you said, that there's something really important for men to relate to, and that's we go back to the story, and that's why I wanted to get into understanding the dragon and the striker, and that's because that's what we see men all the time, and I've dealt with this a lot because you see these dark subcultures that grow out of masculinity, and and I've done it. Everybody does it, you cover everything with skulls, and everything's about like blackness and darkness and whatever. But that's just because men are drawn to this thing that they have to be, they have to encounter. They're drawn toward the serpent because they have to become themselves. They have to overcome the serpent. And, that's not something women don't want to get near the serpent. Why would you but men are like drawn to the serpent because something about that is part of their identity. And so when you see Indra referred to the whole way through the Rig Veda, he's always referred to as the Indra who slayed the dragon, and Indra, the Vṛtra killer. It's part of what he is. He became himself through his encounter with that dragon. And that's what men do generally, is that they become themselves by encountering something that they're afraid of, or they're overcoming something that's a big foe. And then obviously, you spend the Rig Veda, the shit talking about how he overcame him and he was emasculate and whatever. But it's something I think a lot of guys can relate to.
Yeah, and you have to be careful when you go after the snake, because then you can become a black sprung servile host yourself. It's like Nietzsche and the abyss.
Yes, exactly.
And so the idea is to get the thing done, is to not continue to chase the dragon until you become basically defeated, but to kill it.
Yeah, to kill it or defeat it or make it go back and give the waters back or whatever. That's what I think. Yeah, a lot of guys lose sight of it, and they just luxuriate in this obsession with the darkness and so forth. And that's not really the point of any of these stories. The point is to overcome it, and and get your own sovereignship. Like that Rajan. And then I talked about that Rajan word and obviously Fire in the Dark. And it's connected with Rex and linguistically it becomes it's all the words for kingship that we still use. I mean, I think that I guess now I think when I wrote it, it was before Elizabeth died, but her title was Virginia, which sounds like something else, but it's Virginia, like, because that's the feminine of Rex. That's what king is, and that we've been using that to this day, and that's what they were using back then, just in a different form with the Rajan. So drilling down on that in the past, I've gone through it and what that really means. I think it comes back to a word that means to write something, to not write as in with a pen, but to make things right or straight or aligned. And that's what kings do, like bring it back to where it's right. And that's, I think, that are just a really important. There's so many little tools of linguistics right there. Like in the same way that like we call rulers make rules. Like rulers make rules, and draw lines. It's little plays on words, but they have some meaning that actually isn't just a coincidence. But anyway, I thought
we have to do that for ourselves. Especially in the world we live in now.
Absolutely.
We really do have to be our own, we have to be independently sovereign in our daily lives, because there really isn't somebody qualified to do that for us.
Exactly. Yeah. And usually when you give that out to somebody else, you regret it later. I mean, that's very American, like perspective at this point too. Obviously, there's a lot of language like that in the Rig Veda. Like the Maruts are described as self-yoked a lot, which I don't know what the translation of that, or like what Sanskrit words that comes from. But self-yoked is something I liked a lot as well. It's very along those lines. Sometimes we'll have to. Yeah, so sometime we'll have to do a separate one of these sometime on the Maruts themselves, because I've spent a lot of time.
Self-luminous, that's my favorite. Self-luminous.
Oh yeah.
I love that. I love that one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Cool. Well, I think I'm going to run through one of these a little quicker than the last one, because we got a lot of these things, but in case we see any more things that we want to jump on, because this is really, I think, interesting, and I really wanted to give people just a sense of this dragon and what it is. So we'll continue with the story a little bit. Okay, so this is I guess it's the next hymn. It's 33 of Indra. So come, fain for booty, let us seek to Indra. Yet more shall he increase his care that guides us. Will not the indestructible endow us with perfect knowledge of this wealth of cattle? I fly to him, invisible wealth giver, as flies the falcon to the cherished eyrie. With fairest hymns of praise adoring Indra, with whom those who laud him must invoke in battle. Mid all his host, he bindeth on the quiver, he driveth the cattle from what foe he pleaseth, gathering up the great store of riches, Indra. Be thou no trafficker with us, most mighty. Thou slewest with tiny bolt the wealthy Dasu, alone, yet going with thy helpers, Indra, far from the floor of heaven in all directions, the ancient, rightless ones fled to destruction. Fighting with pious worshippers, the rightless turned and fled, Indra, with averted faces. When thou, fierce lord of the bay steeds, the stayer, blewest from earth and heaven and sky, the godless. They met in fight the army of the blameless. Then the Navagvas put forth all of their power. They, like emasculates with men contending, fled, conscious, by steep paths from Indra, scattered. Whether they weep or laugh, thou hast overthrown them, O Indra, on the sky's extremest limit. The Dasu thou hast burned from heaven, and welcomed the prayer of him who pours the juice and lauds thee. Adorned with their array of gold and jewels, they o'er the earth a covering veil extended. Although they hastened, they overcame not Indra. Their spies he compassed with the sun of morning. As thou enjoyest heaven and earth, O Indra, on every side surrounded with thy greatness, so thou with priests hast blown away the Dasu, and whose worship not with those who worship. They who pervaded earth's extremest limit, subdued not with their charms the wealth bestower, Indra, the bull, made his ally, the thunder, and with its light milked cows from out the darkness. I'm just going to stop there and just one of the things that I think I stumbled over a word there that I wasn't familiar with, the Navagvas. Do you know what that was referring to? Is that another name for the Dasu?
I don't think it's for Dasu. I think it's. I'm not 100% sure, but okay. I think it's someone on the good side.
Oh, the Navagvas put forth all the power. Okay, yeah,
I think it's not the bad guys.
right. So it's okay, yeah, that makes sense. But a big part of this whole piece of it is also making the other cult of evil sorcerers and their slaves godless.
Yeah.
They're godless or impious, which, godless can mean, what's that quote from like Joseph Campbell? Like, myth is some other person's religion, so like godless can mean they don't worship the right gods, as is often the case. But so it's just different people with a different religion, but they're impious towards their gods. And that's something that men do tribally, generally speaking. It's, I've pointed it out before. People don't like this because it's just reality. It's human nature. It's really a trigger for genocide. It is like we work it out, like when men separate their groups tribally, like the other men don't worship the correct gods. Therefore, they are doing the work of demons. Therefore, we must slay them like demons. Like it dehumanizes the other thing because they are now not doing the work of God. They're doing the work of some of evil. And so we set that up usually. I mean, that's what we always have to do. We have to always create this narrative when we go to war. It can't just be because the other team is the other team. If we're going to go and slay men, it has to be because they're aligned with evil, or they're a whole group of evil people, which is actually almost never the case. They're a whole group of evil, godless, terrible people, and that's what men do. And it's just you can be act above it all, like, because you can see it in modernity, but it doesn't mean it's not real and that you wouldn't do it either. Like you have to make the other team the bad guys, and they're effeminate, and you have to emasculate them, and like you can see it with sports teams, like, which I find amazing. Like in American sports teams, people complain about and I know nothing about sports. I try to know nothing about sports, but well, St. Louis, those guys are cowards, like as if the whole this team of professional athletes are actually cowards. But there's this whole almost WWE thing that they set up, like I can't believe they behave that way, it's kind of a ridiculous thing, and they do it in MMA too, and they set up this narrative of who the bad guy and who the good guy is. What in wrestling, because I did hung out with that pro wrestler guy. It's like there's the heel, and you have to determine who the heel is so you understand the narrative before you go into it. Like, this is the guy who's going to lose, and this guy is going to be the baby face, and so it's just an interesting thing that men always do. So it's always worked into our religions, and it's neither good nor bad. It's just human. It's just what we do. We can see it, but I just think people don't like to acknowledge that that's what that is. The other guys are bad. Why are they bad? So we can kill them. That's it is what it is.
100%.
Yeah. So let me jump onto I think that's the last page. The waters flowed according to their nature. They raid the navigable streams, waxed mightily. Then Indra, with his spirit concentrated, smote him forever with the strongest weapon. Indra broke through Ilibisa's strong castles, and Susna with his horn he cut to pieces. Thou, Magavan, for all his might and swiftness, slew thy fighting foeman with thy thunder. Fierce on his enemies fell Indra's weapon. With his sharp bull he rent their forts in pieces. He with his thunderbolt dealt blows on Vṛtra and conquered, executing his purpose. Indra, thou helpest Kutsa, whom thou lovest, and guardest brave Dasadyu when he battled. The dust of trampling horses rose to heaven. And the Svritra's son stood up again for conquest. Svritra's mild steer, O Magavan, thou helpest in combat for the land, mid Tugra's houses. Long stood they there before the task has ended. Thou wast the master of the foeman's treasure. So there are a lot of allusions in this particular hymn to wealth at the beginning. It being this guy also had a great deal of wealth. I think which is associated with water, like we said. He had water and resources and whatever, and obviously tons of slaves. And then there's some interesting pieces. And another thing I noticed was now he has castles and fortresses. There's castles and forts all through this as well. So, like I said, it's just bigger and bigger. And now it's Sauron. Now he has castles and fortresses and slaves and this whole evil empire that they're overcoming. It's very. The more we dig down on this, the more it has detail to it. Now I'm going to hit you up with this because I didn't say beforehand. Look this up, but Indra broke through Ilibisa's strong castles. Is that another word for Vṛtra?
I don't know. I was reading through this and I was like, oh, I really need to look, because there's so many names. It's like Homer in the sense that it's like everyone's cousin's brother's aunt's sister somehow gets a little part in the story. But I don't know that.
That's in the Germanic literature, it's I think Odin has 60 names or something like that. It's a retarded amount of like names and epithets and different ways you can refer to him. And that's the case with so many of these gods, like, there's so many just phrases that they use, even like for Zeus. Like my favorite is who loves the lightning. Zeus, who loves the lightning. Like that's amazing.
And I don't know who Shushna with his horn he cut to pieces. I don't know who that is. Vṛtra is the sun just before sunrise. I know that. There's a whole story with that as well. Just at that moment, just before sunrise. Vṛtra.
Interesting.
Don't know who Tugra is either. Tugra's houses.
Yeah, like there's, like I said, now we're adding extra characters to this whole thing. Now, you had mentioned earlier that there's a second story that follows this one about the cattle, which is similar theme. Obviously, cattle is wealth in all societies up until currency. Cattle's, not all societies because they have different crops and so forth, but definitely very European. And you can see it. One of the things I think that's so cool about the Indo-European stuff and the Greek material and so forth is that they're all cattle herding people.
Yeah.
And so then it translates to the American West very quickly, because you see the same stories happening again when you have wide open spaces and men competing for, cattle and, oh, they killed our cattle, they took our cattle, they moved our cattle, there's a horse thief. Yeah. All the stuff it is very much more contemporary than it seems, being thousands of years old. And all of a sudden you're watching Yellowstone in Rig Vedic times. It's like, let's fight over the cattle. But
so many references to the cattle, not just the cattle, but what the cattle provide is being held back. And that's why the cattle are so important. It's not just because they're pretty. It's because
not the pretty cows.
They work the land. They pull things. And milk is a pretty valuable resource. Also, it was an animal of sacrifice as well.
Yeah.
So beyond what it also to give to the gods. Yeah. That second story, the Vala, the cave, where Vṛtra's brother is holding back the cattle in a cave. And it's a whole nother story with a whole bunch of stuff about cows and the sun. And the sun as well.
And the sun is in that as well. Interesting. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah. Maybe we should dig into that one sometime with Christopher Robertson because he wrote that whole piece about the cattle of the sun from the Odyssey.
It's very excellent as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, there's a lot of, like I said, cattle thieving is a whole different, portion of this, these old cultures. Which again is only very new. I mean, really, we can, all these people who want us to stop eating meat and Bill Gates buying up all the farmland and trying to feed us like crickets. They're holding the cattle again. They're doing it again. It's the same story.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
And that's why it becomes, when you look at this stuff, it's so that whole meat as a metaphor becomes very important when you look at it mythically. Men eat meat when they're prosperous, and the slaves don't. Like the slaves are fed whatever garbage you give them, and but men of means who are respectable eat meat, and that's how they're known, and they're wealthy and so forth, because they have many cattle and they can eat meat. And then when you're making them into slaves when you take their meat away, and that's it's such a powerful symbol that I don't think a lot of people see how old and important that symbol is. It's not just like, oh, well, you can just change your diet. Like there's a lot there. That's the meaning that doesn't go away.
Yeah. And depending on the cultural context, also, taking away milk and butter in the Vedic times, like taking away milk and butter was the exact same thing.
Yeah,
because it's equally nourishing, really, and it's a transfer. Milk is sort of like a transformation of the blood of a cow, really.
Right.
So it
right.
And it can be everlasting, whereas the meat, it is kind of a one-time deal, but the milk will just keep flowing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and cheese keeps a lot longer. When you get into that,
ghee, that's a whole nother.
Oh yeah, we could talk for. I'm sure you could. I know for a fact that you can talk forever about ghee. But we'll save that for a different one. But
one thing I wanted to point out, as you in a lot of these hymns, Vritra killing the dragon, the meaning of the dragon. Not Indra killing Vritra the dragon. Often Indra is described, it's often saying that he took the soma, that he's drank the juice. But a word that comes up often is mud, which means like intoxicated. And so when Indra is, throwing this thunderbolt, killing the dragon, it's often translated as he's, doing it in rapturous joy. Rapturous joy in killing this demon. Sanskrit is mud, which is basically high. Like he's high on it.
right.
Do we see that in like? Do we ever? Is Heracles described as going after the beast? In ecstatic joy?
Well, it's in the Germanic stuff.
Yeah.
Battle frenzy. All through the Indo-European stuff. If you go into, obviously you have in the Tane, in the Celtic thing that you survived in Ireland, but really describes things that never happened in Ireland because they have chariots and the Irish never had chariots. Their hero, which I will always butcher his name by because it's in Celtic or whatever. The hero there, the hero of the story of the Tane, Kulingi, the Tambo Kulingi, I believe is how you pronounce that part of it. We'd have to get Paul in here for that. He has a something called the torque, and he goes into a battle frenzy where he becomes like crazy and his hair stands on end, and then like he becomes this crazy like battle battle rage crazy. And obviously in the Germanic literature you have the berserkers who are basically high. Some people have theorized that that myth comes from them taking mushrooms or something like that. And then people running, and then naked warriors, like the Celts or whatever, like run into battle naked or whatever. And there's a lot of stuff like that where the battle lust, battle frenzy, battle, and
it's I guess right.
I have talked to some guys who feel that they've experienced that. So whether veterans or also, I know a UFC fighter who I've talked to a bunch about that, and he's like, "There's a weird thing that happens, like when you're out in the ring and whatever, and it's you're never really more alive than when that happens." And so I think that's that I could see that being that making sense. Like it comes across because any warrior culture is going to know that. Because this moment where you might actually die, or you might win, is you're never going to have anything more. Yeah, you're never going to be more alive than that, than when that happens, because you're like on the verge of death or total winning, and that's death or glory, and then, I'm not really like looking to have that experience myself anytime soon, but, it's, I imagine, anytime when you take a big risk like that and you have a lot to lose, there's a certain
you might get a
exhilaration.
little taste of that,
Yeah.
with our own dragons.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking it's like, it's righteous bloodlust, really.
Yeah.
And so, rapturous joy, this righteous bloodlust, and the demon though doesn't get to experience the rapturous joy. He's equally, Vritra is equally out to destroy,
Right.
but he doesn't get to have joy.
Yeah. Or we don't get to hear about it.
Yeah.
we don't get to hear about it. Yeah.
He's,
I mean, again, that's not propaganda, and the history
he's a
is written by the
sneaky
winners.
magician.
Yeah, he's a sneaky magician. He's always a jerk. Yeah. But
so that's an interesting contrast, because the joy of the bloodlust is for the person that is doing it for the sake of, literally, for cosmic order.
Right.
And the other, the demon is his bloodlust is for chaos.
Right.
And so there's no joy in that.
Yeah.
Unless someone decides to write the story from
Vṛtra's perspective. These crazy people were coming up from the north, and I was just trying to feed my family. We had the water. We built a dam. It's a dam. It's our irrigation system.
We're constantly lighting fires. Why are they pouring all of that butter into the fire? Why won't they give me any of that butter? And they just keep pouring it in there. And I'd like a cow too. Yeah. Cool.
So, all right. Well, I think let's just go through the last one, because we had 3 hymns that we wanted to go through. So I'll read through the last one, and if we want to have any final comments, we can wrap that up from there.
Which is the next one?
The next one is, I believe that's C. So it's book 10, 111.
Yeah. All right.
So the hymn is, "Bring forth your sacred song, ye prudent singers, even as are the thoughts of human beings. Let us draw Indra with true deeds anear us. He loves our songs, the hero, and is potent." The hymn shone brightly from the seat of worship. To the kine came the bull, and the heifer's offspring with mighty bellowing hath he arisen, and hath pervaded even the spacious regions. Indra knows, verily, how to hear our singing, for he victorious has made a path for Surya. He made the cow, and he became the sovereign of heaven, primeval, matchless, and unshaken. Praised by Angirasis, Indra demolished with the might the works of the great watery monster. Full many regions, too, hath he pervaded, and by his truth supported earth's foundation. The counterpart of heaven and earth is Indra. He knoweth all libations, slayeth Susna. The vast sky with the sun hath he extended, and best of pillars, stated with a pillar. The Vṛtra slayer with his bolt felled Vṛtra. The magic of the godless, waxen mighty, Here hast thou bold assailant, boldly conquered. Yea, then thine arms, O Magavan, were potent. When the dawns come attendant upon Surya, their rays discover wealth of diverse colors. The star of heaven is seen as 'twere approaching. None knoweth aught of its departeth, aught of it as it departeth. Far have they gone, the first of all these waters, the waters that flowed forth when Indra sent them. Where is their spring? Where is their foundation? Where now, ye waters, is your inmost center? Thou didst free rivers, swallowed by the dragon, and rapidly they set themselves in motion, those that were loosed and those that longed for freedom. Excited now to speed, they run unresting. Yearning together, they have sped to Sintu, the fort destroyer, praised of old, hath loved them. Indra, may thy terrestrial treasures reach us, and our full songs of joy approach thy dwelling. So this focuses specifically on the songs and the singers and the singing of these hymns to Indra. And that's a big, obviously, focus of the bigger picture of the Rig Veda, is that they are songs, right?
Ritual hymns.
Yeah, and they're sung to please the gods during the rituals, and to sing their praises and say, "Bring me sons and wealth and strength and might and all that."
And there was a whole system. I mean, the system still exists of meter, certain types of meter and pronunciation were key, because sound vibration itself, like fire, was a sort of a gateway to direct contact with the gods. So the singing of the hymns during the ritual was big, very important.
Yeah, it always adds something to ritual if there's music. I always say, unless you need some drums and you need a couple things, and to bring it all together. It's again, obviously,
you see here, there's a little bit. This is from book 10.
Yeah.
Where you start to see a little bit of contemplation about, a little bit of the sort of asking big questions. You have this whole, all of this praise of the gods and like super excellence and high test stuff. But when you get to book 10, which is believed to have been slightly younger than the rest, books 1 and books 10 are considered to have been composed a little bit later. Not much, but a little bit later, and then tacked on to the ones in the center.
Oh, really?
The books in the center, 2 through 9, could be directly attributed to specific family lines. There's actually pretty good evidence they know, like, who passed them down. But 1 and 10 tacked on a little bit later. But in book 10, you start to see, there's that hymn about creation in there. But here in line 8 of what you just read, where now, ye waters, is your inmost center. They're asking those questions that can't really be answered.
Yeah, and there's obviously references to the sun god in there as well. There's Surya, I believe, right?
Yes.
The star of heaven. Yeah.
I just happened to notice that stuck out to me. Like, well, that's an interesting question. The waters have been freed. The dragon is slain. The waters are flowing. And I guess now things are bountiful. So now you can sort of stop and go, where is the center of where the water comes from?
Now everything's cool, so you can be like, hey, so like
now there's time to start a little contemplation. But
Yeah.
that's a fact.
What is real? Yeah.
That's a fact. You know, when there's chaos, there isn't time to stop. And who am I? Who am I? Where does
Exactly.
the water come from? You know, it's no time for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. There's no time for navel gazing when you have like, hard work to do and the world's falling apart around you.
When a dragon is holding back the waters, there's no time for yoga.
Yeah. The dragon's evil. Kill the dragon. End of story. That's what needs to happen. Yeah. And then after that, you can be like, what is a dragon?
What is a dragon? We don't want to go.
Yeah. Exactly. What is the nature of the universe and its relationship to the dragon? Yeah. But I guess that brings us back around and to a podcast that I uploaded before this one, although we're recording it before I finished up recording it. So it's a little out of order, but I wrote an essay a year or so ago called The Name of the Dragon is Negation. And basically around the concept that, when you get differentiation is life, like when in the beginning, there was the word, you create the world by giving things separation and difference and their own identity. And death is really like the elimination of that separation because, life is separated from dirt. I mean, we all are, made of stars and we come from dirt. And when we die, we return to dirt. And that separation is over. So life is really that's distinction from what makes us different from the dirt. We all become the same raw materials again at some point. And so the dragon in the biggest sense is really, an operative of death and, the elimination of differentiation and the void. And, obviously in this context, it's a little bit more into the real world than that, less conceptual. But really what the dragon is doing is holding back life. He's holding back water. He's holding back prosperity and so forth. He's not actually, fire breathing dragon that kills everybody, or not that we know of. We don't have that verse. But it is, he's holding back prosperity and life and vitality and so forth. So I just wanted to tie all that together because I think the concept of the dragon being an agent of chaos and chaos ultimately being non-differentiation and a lack of an axis or meaning. And that's the big picture, since we don't have Vṛtra standing right there, I can navel gaze and talk about the nature of reality in the universe. And I think that's important to reflect on in this bigger picture. But anyway, and do you have anything else you want to talk about, or should we wrap it up right now?
We can wrap it up. I mean, I was going to say actually that non-differentiation. Yeah. You can't non-differentiation eliminates the potential to manifest your own sovereignty because the whole all is one thing. A lot of people tend to think that that's what they're getting from Eastern thought, but that thread is there, but it's absolutely not the mainstream thing. Differentiation is really important. It's required. It's required for a sense of yourself. It's required for love.
Yeah.
You can't if there's no differentiation, there's no relationship.
Right.
And then there's no purpose. Really to anything. I mean, it's a whole conversation that could be a completely different podcast.
Oh, for sure. But it's all important. It's all related. Yeah. It's all very, I'm glad to hear you say that and add that in because that is, without differentiation, there's nothing. And I think that people, like you said, they get this like kill your ego and all this stuff. And they think, like you said, they're getting it from Eastern stuff. And they think it's like special wisdom that Westerners didn't figure out or something like that. And it's really, I think, the void. When I hear that we kill your ego and we're all the same and like nothing matter, I'm like, that's nihilism. And that is the void. You know, and
Yeah, you can.
that's very religious at that point. It becomes like, that is, you are an agent of the chaos. You know, like that's, you know, it becomes very real at that point. Like, you know, it's interesting.
You can conceive, and it's not just Eastern thought. There's also things within the Greek canon where it's like you could say, okay, everything comes from God, or I'm the same as God, or one with God, but also different. That's how I perceive it. It's like also different, and it's simultaneous, and it's actually probably inconceivable.
Right.
And so I'm in this world, and I'm going to have a framework, draw lines, name names, and do the best to become self-luminous.
Exactly. Cool.
I can become
right,
one with God when I'm dead.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, that's really what happens, right?
I've made that appointment. So
yeah. All right. So Ed is a member of the Order of Fire. That is my men's organization. If you're interested, we like to joke that we are guys who lift and read the Rig Veda. And there's a lot of both. And yeah, obviously we read a lot of like classic literature and so forth. And really, if you've read my book, Fire in the Dark, you know what we're trying to get at with solar idealism and creating solar culture. And this podcast is the first episode of many, I think, that we'll do with collaborations with members of the Order of Fire, exploring some of the ideas, because we're really trying to, create a new mythology and cobble together all these old mythologies and create something new and alive right now in the present. And that's our mission. And it's a big one, and it's a big project. But as you can see, these are the kind of discussions that we're having. And I think that, exploring these concepts on this level is really exciting and really important. And one of the more interesting things that we're doing. So, if you want to keep following this Vṛtra podcast and this, the creative works that we're putting out, and possibly even join the Order of Fire and apply to join, we'll be interested to hear more about that. All right. So thank you for listening, everyone, and stay solar.